Good afternoon and welcome to Chargers Outside Zone. I'm Chuck and this is
Thomas.
And we are launching our podcast today, so we're pretty excited.
Yes, we are.
So just a couple ground rules that we've put together to tell you a little bit about Chargers Outside Zone. Number one, this is a father-son hobby.
So don't get too hard on us.
Yeah, and don't take it too serious. We're learning how to podcast
and doing it with the Los Angeles Chargers,
which should be fun. Next thing is we're going to focus on team building. So generally, long-term team building. How's the team assembled coming out of training camp? How do they play throughout the season?
This is going to be like a Madden franchise mode, but in real life.
Very true. And then obviously, as you hit free agency in the draft, how does the team get better for the next year?
Yes.
The other thing is we are not experts. We're not pretending to be experts.
Shocking. I know. We are. I'm wearing a Los Angeles Chargers t-shirt, but I'm not an expert.
We are not experts. We will utilize big boards, rankings, all the usual websites. You could go through PFF Elite subscription, Over the Cap, all the websites that everybody
All the
knows.
usual
Suspects.
Yes.
Another thing is we will not have any gambling or betting talk.
We will not be hosting any gambling or being sponsored.
Yeah, we just don't want to give out terrible advice, since we are not experts and we barely know what we're talking about, so we wouldn't want to lead anyone astray.
Yes, we wouldn't.
And the last thing is our goal is to try to stay away from hot takes. That may be more difficult for some
than others.
Since somebody watches YouTube rants all day.
And Stephen A. Smith.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started here. And what we wanted to do was to take a look at the Chargers 2021 initial 53-man roster. This is on the screen right now is the offensive side of the ball on August 31st, 2021. Now, as we head into 2022, 53-man roster, will it look identical? Probably not as far as the breakdown. But we thought this was a good starting point, or at least I did.
Yes. I did not help you with this, to be honest. Probably the only couple people that are going to be locks.
Yeah, no, this is last year's roster. So the breakdown is pretty simple, as you can see on the screen. 3 quarterbacks were taken, 3 quarterbacks were kept on the roster. That would be obviously Justin Herbert, Chase Daniel, and Easton Stick. 4 running backs: Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, Larry Roundtree III. 1 fullback, Gabe Neighbors. 4 tight ends: Jared Cook, Steven Anderson, Donald Parham Jr., and Trey McKitty. There were 5 wide receivers: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jalen Guyton, Joshua Palmer, KJ Hill Jr. On the offensive line, Rashawn Slater, Matt Filer, Corey Lindsley, Ode Abushi, Brian Balaga, Scott Quisenberry, Trey Pipkins III, Storm Norton, and Brendan James. So that was how the offensive side of the roster broke out, and there were 26 offensive players kept on the initial 53-man roster. As we move to the defensive side of the ball, 5 defensive linemen: Linval Joseph, Justin Jones, Jerry Tillery, Christian Covington, and Foster Merrill. 4 edges: Joey Bosa, Uchenna Nwosu, Kyler Fackrell, Chris Rumpf II. Linebackers: 5, Kenneth Murray Jr., Kaiser White, Drew Tranquil, Nick Neiman, Amen Ogbong Bamiga.
Yes.
And that brings us to the secondary cornerback 7, rookie Asante Samuel Jr., Michael Davis, Chris Harris Jr., Tevin Campbell, Brendan Faison, Mark Webb Jr., Keeman Hall. And the safeties were Derwin James, Nasir Adderley, Alohi Gilman, with your 3 specialists coming out of camp in 2021, punter Ty Long, kicker Tristan Vizcaino, and long snapper Matt Overton.
So what you can really see is last year on the free agency front, they really did damage on the offensive front.
Correct. With the signing of Matt Filer, Corey Lindsley was brought in. So
And they also drafted an offensive lineman that fell to them.
So definitely some focus on the offensive side of the ball in free agency and the draft.
Now, when we go into this year's free agency, which will be another
it's coming
slide,
up here soon. Yeah. We'll see the focus there.
We'll see the focus there.
All right. So the day after the initial 53-man roster was put out, you obviously have all 32 teams cutting people, releasing them, and so then before they rotate to the practice squad, they can be claimed by other teams. The Chargers, what they went ahead and did is they claimed defensive lineman Eric Banks, claimed cornerback Trey Marshall, and with those moves, they waived cornerback Brandon Faison, and waived defensive lineman Forrest Merrill. So, and as you can see here, also, the practice squad was put together. Michael Bandy, Darius Bradwell, Cole Christensen, Ben DeLuca, Emeki Egbule, Brendan Fahico, Joe Gaziano, Nate Gilliam, Ryan Hunter Campmoyer, Jason Moore Jr., and Joe Reed. So generally that's how the 53-man roster practice squad ended up as at the end of training camp 2021. So now we wanted to do a breakdown of the a look at the season itself and any significant moves or injuries that happened during the season. And so with that, week 1, first game of the season was at the Washington football team. That was a win, 20-16. But during that game, Brian Bulaga, I think it was a back, and coming out of that game, he was placed on IR, and they went out and signed guard tackle Michael Schofield III. In that game, I think Storm Norton came on and finished out the game. And so that was his, getting on the field.
So, as you can tell, they really struggled with depth.
Losing your right tackle in game 1.
Yes.
Then they went into week 2, lost to Dallas 20-17. A game that probably should have won, without a few offensive penalties, but ended up a loss. Then went into Kansas City, got a win, 30-24. And out of that game, they had to make some moves. So the defensive lineman that was claimed right after the initial 53-man roster, Eric Banks, he was waived. They signed Joe Gaziano off the practice squad. They signed Forrest Merrill off the practice squad. And then Justin Jones went to IR along with Kenneth Murray Jr. after that game.
Yes. And
then on to the home game against the Las Vegas Raiders, where, the Chargers got up early, 21-0 at the half. held on in the second half to, win that game. Some interesting things out of that game was Brandon Faison. He actually terminated his practice squad contract.
And then signed with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, ended up on the Raiders and playing some quality minutes, at some point in the season for sure.
Yes.
So it was kind of interesting, the timing of that termination.
No, to be honest, I didn't watch tape with you.
Yeah, but I'm still making my way through the Game Pass season. I think I'm in the fourth quarter of this game. The Week 5 game at home against Cleveland, where the Chargers got the win 47-42
against
the Browns.
The Browns, which no one should be surprised about.
Well, I mean, it was a shootout there in the fourth with between Justin Herbert and Baker Mayfield. So a couple mistakes made on defense.
Yes.
Out of that game, I think it was in maybe the second quarter there where Ode Ibushi went down with a knee injury. So then they had to go out and sign guard Senio Calamity. And the interesting part is the person who replaced Ibushi was Michael Schofield. He was the first one off the bench to fill in at that right guard position. And from there, traveled to Baltimore, and as everyone already knows, it was a 34-6 loss, almost a shocking loss in the fact that the offense couldn't get started in that game. It'll be interesting to watch it and see what the breakdown is.
Yes.
So at after the first third of the season, headed into the bye at 4-2 after that terrible loss to the Ravens, down 2 starting offensive linemen, and having Kenneth Murray and Justin Jones missing some games. Obviously, I think it was apparent at that point that Bulaga probably wasn't coming back and Ibushi was out for the season. But that you would get your 2 defensive guys back.
Seems like we knew our fate at those positions.
Yeah. So week 7 was the bye week, and during the bye week, they went ahead and signed Andre Roberts as the kick returner, waived KJ Hill Jr. in a 1-for-1 swap there. I think a lot of early kicking woes led to going out and finding Dustin Hopkins and going ahead and waiving Tristan Vizcaino, although he was kept around on the practice squad. But I think that was more COVID related.
As just another body, and we'll see if they keep the NFL with their protocol, with
how it's impacts the practice squad.
With the practice squad.
And then Justin Jones made his return during the bye week, and Forrest Merrill was waived, but once again found his way to the practice squad and stuck around. Then New England visited week 8.
Which should be a loss anyway, because
and it was
England.
Well, and it was a 27-24 loss. I'm generally opposed to watching Patriot games, so it'll be interesting to go back and watch this replay.
And we signed somebody, but that's
in the future.
That's in the future.
Yeah. So heading into week 9, traveling to Philadelphia, long trips to Washington. Now another long trip east to the East Coast to play Philly. Got a win, 27-24. And out of that game, then Kenneth Murray returns. He gets activated from IR, and Ryan Smith gets placed on IR. And I think that's the last move for Ryan Smith. Week 10, Minnesota travels to LA to play the Chargers, and it ends up in a loss, 20-27. Week 11, Pittsburgh is in LA.
Which is when we kind of started.
When you kind of started. And really the Chargers dominated that game. The score is, doesn't really reflect the win there. Pittsburgh scored a bunch of stuff late.
Well, you have Big Ben. Well,
yeah.
I have Justin Herbert.
Yeah. So then after week 11, Mark Webb Jr. is placed on IR. Week 12, Denver travels to LA, and probably a game where didn't put our usual number of points on the board. Ended up losing 28-13.
Well, now they have Mr. Unlimited, so let's.
And then out of that signed cornerback Devontae Harris. So the Chargers ended up going 2-3 during the middle third of the season, now sitting at 6-5, with both Murray and Jones having returned, and having a new kicker and new returner coming out of the bye week, out of that week 7 bye week. Our apologies for the dogs in the background.
Our apologies.
Our studio is coming together, but not quite there yet.
Yes.
Week 13 at Cincinnati, amazing football game. If you watched it, Chargers got out big. Cincinnati was coming back, and then the Chargers were able to turn the tide once again and ended up blowing Cincinnati out 41-22.
And the coach actually stayed on the plane.
On the return, yes.
On the return. Shocking.
Out of that game, though, they lost Kyler Fackrell to IR. Week 14, the New York Giants traveled to LA, where the Chargers were able to win 37-21. Week 15, Kansas City visited LA.
On a Thursday night?
Yeah, that was a quick turnaround game. 4 days. I guess they usually favors the home team, but in this instance, just got slightly outscored by Kansas City. I think they were getting hot at this point.
Honestly, they had their biggest weapon at the time.
Yeah. And ended up 34-28. Out of this game, pretty scary sight on the field. Don't need to rehash that, but this is where Donald Parham Jr. went to IR and wouldn't return the rest of the season. My arrow's pointing down, but that's a claimed cornerback there. But then we hit a point in the season. We've had a couple rough COVID weeks, but I think the week 16 at Houston was referred to as the COVID game.
We're not going to cover it.
Yeah. And,
at least the COVID part of it, we're still going to cover the game part of it.
Yeah. And came out of Houston with a really surprising loss, 41-29. Put the Chargers on their heels, where they generally had to win out to make the playoffs. And yes. I think I got one of these Denver games incorrect. Obviously, one of the Denver games was at home. I think this week 17 one was the home game where they got the win 34-13. And out of that game, Kyler Fackrell returns, and then the cornerback that was claimed after week 15, he is then waived. And then week 18,
which is a Sunday nighter, if I do recall.
The Sunday night game where if both teams tied, they would make the playoffs. But in this case, Chargers got down a little bit. Amazing comeback to tie the game. Lots of fourth down conversions, lots of amazing passes. Goes to overtime. The ball goes back and forth. And then in the end,
we go
Daniel
home.
Carlson kicks a field goal with time expiring. 35-32. Las Vegas Raiders on to the playoffs. Los Angeles Chargers season ended in disappointment.
Yes.
But a lot of hope nonetheless. Always able to score points most of the time. So let's see where it goes from here. In the final third of the season, the Chargers went 500, 3-3 to finish the season 9-8, just above 500. They lost that win and get in game against the Raiders, missed the playoffs, and now are slotted to pick number 17 in the 2022 NFL Draft.
Which we do have a pretty good draft pick.
Yeah, and we'll go through some changes here and leading up to the draft, some questions. So there were some reserved future contracts that were signed, to start the offseason. A lot of these names that you see here on this screen, Michael Bandy, Cole Christensen, Ben DeLuca, those are names that were on the practice squad through most of the season. A couple of additions there. And then as we get into exiting or likely to exit offensive free agents, you have Justin Jackson, Jared Cook, Steven Anderson. KJ Hill was already gone, but Andre Roberts, free agent. Ode Ibushi, free agent. Brian Balaga, you'll see in a couple slides, he was actually released. And Scott Quisenberry was a free agent. Linval Joseph, another free agent, along with Justin Jones. The edge group, Uchenna and Wosu, Kyler Fackrell, losing 2 of your 4 edges. Not optimum there.
But
at linebacker, Kaiser White was a free agent. Chris Harris, as we mentioned before, Brandon Faison, he was already gone. And all the specialists were free agents or released. So as we look at this 2022 offseason, the 53-man roster, this portion of it is the end of the league year through first wave of free agency, probably a little bit further. But the first big move, the Chargers went out. No.
Oh.
First big move was re-signing one of our own, wide receiver Mike Williams,
to a 3-year contract
at roughly $20 million a year. But there was questions: would they let him test free agency? Would he be back? Would he sign somewhere else? And he's back. So 3 more years of Mike Williams.
3 more years. Yes.
The next 3 people were exclusive rights free agents. Really good for the team. Probably not a great deal for the player themselves. But Jalen Guyton, Storm Norton, and Donald Parham Jr. All return under exclusive rights free agency deals or tenders.
What does that mean?
We'll get into that in a different episode. For now, we'll just keep moving along. They went ahead and released Brian Balaga. And then probably the most shocking news, when it relates to the Chargers.
We traded for Khalil Mack.
Yes, bringing in Khalil Mack for a 2022 second round and a 2023 sixth round pick.
Is a steal.
Yeah. To get Khalil Mack opposite Joey Bosa, reuniting him with Brendan Staley, I don't think you're going to find too many people that's going to say that's a bad move.
No, it's not.
And then other connections with Brendan Staley, they went ahead and pulled Sebastian Joseph Day over from the Rams.
Yes.
Which
is a very good defensive move.
Yeah, for the defensive line. A big swing in free agency was the signing of cornerback J.C. Jackson,
Yes.
premier cornerback in the free agency world or in the free agency list.
He was a undrafted rookie. So
For
he
the
got
Patriots?
paid. Yes.
Sweet.
He got paid.
Yeah, deservedly so.
5 years. 2.
And then,
Shocking.
and we weren't done, or the Chargers weren't done with free agency at that point. Went ahead and signed Austin Johnson, defensive lineman from the New York Giants. Re-signed a couple of their own defensive linemen, Christian Covington, Chase Daniel, quarterback. I think that's a sign that Justin Herbert likes having Chase Daniel in that quarterback room.
Yes, it is. And I think that was before free agents.
Well, I think it was just during that time. Yeah. Other signees, long snapper Josh Harris from the Falcons, punter J.K. Scott from the Jaguars. It's
the Jaguars.
And then things went a little bit quiet for a bit, but then they went back
Signed
out
a tight end
and added a tight end to the room, Gerald Everett, who also was part of the Rams when Brendan Staley was there. So bringing guys in that he knows, and then went and signed wide receiver DeAndre Carter, mostly a returner, but I think he gives you. Yeah, mostly as a returner, but I think he gives you more on offense than Andre Roberts.
We'll see.
So, good addition, it looks like on paper. Obviously, let's get to camp.
Paper's not the field.
Right. And then the most recent signing, another Los Angeles Ram.
Which is today.
Which, I think has been either today it was announced.
Reported today.
Troy Reeder, inside linebacker, making his way from the Rams to the Chargers, and that is where we stand with regards to free agency. Now, if we go back and look at the 53-man roster, pretty much things stay the same. A couple areas of change is one of the 4 running backs is no longer on the team. The Chargers lost 2 tight ends, but signed 1 tight end, Gerald Everett.
So lose 2 at game 1.
Yeah.
That point.
At wide receiver, you have your 4 main wide receivers back: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jalen Guyton, Joshua Palmer. You add DeAndre Carter. And then offensive line, the left side of the offensive line is strong because you have Rashawn Slater, Matt Filer, Corey Lindsley back. And
our offensive linemen are big offensive linemen. One's a rookie, so we'll have him for at least 2 more years.
Yep.
We could 5th-year option too.
Yep.
So.
Well, I mean that's down the road, but at the moment
that's down the road.
We had some camera issues, so I'm sure that'll be fun to fix here. But
yes.
Yeah. So as I was saying, the left side of the line, Rashawn Slater, Matt Filer, and at center Corey Lindsley, all played well. All be back this year. But on the right-hand side of the line, Michael Schofield, who finished the season, I think, Ode Abushi, both those players are gone. Scott Quisenberry left. So there is a hole there at right guard. Potentially then at right tackle, you had Storm Norton playing there when Brian Bulaga went down. How much experience did he get?
Yes. I mean,
is there room to upgrade with that year of experience? Is he working on stuff? So when you look at this offensive side of the ball, is right tackle a need? Is right guard a need? Is wide receiver 3, tight end 2, running back 2, or whatever kind of running back you're looking at? Are those the needs at the moment for this Chargers offense? Moving to the defensive side of the ball, obviously you've added in free agency.
A lot more than offense.
Yeah, covering up those losses. So Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, Jerry Tillery, Christian Covington, Foster Merrill. You have five players, 2 that you've signed, 3 that have been around. Is there a need for defensive line help? Everybody talks about improving the run defense. Do those 2 signings do that? Is Jerry Tillery going to be around a little bit longer? Do you need to add somebody to that room? Obviously, edge. You have your
2 main edges.
Yeah, your 2 main edges, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. But what about depth? Is Chris Rumpf edge 3, or do you need to go out and find edge 3 in this draft? At linebacker, Kenneth Murray Jr., Drew Tranquill, Troy Reeder, Nick Neiman, are those guys going to stop you from drafting a linebacker? Linebacker 1, linebacker 2, linebacker 3. Is that a need? Obviously, with J.C. Jackson and Asante Samuel Jr., I think you're good, at one outside corner. You're comfortable at the slot with Asante Samuel Jr. Your other outside with Michael Davis, he started a lot of games last year.
But if a corner falls to you.
Yeah. Do they like Derek Stingley Jr.? Does he fall to 17? Are you looking for a CB4 somewhere in the draft to improve the depth at the
Andrew
position?
Booth Jr. at some point, too?
Oh, he'd have to fall to 17, right?
Yes.
Because he's not going to be there at 79. And then safety, you have Derwin James Jr. Your Nasir Adderley seemed to play well early last year. You have Alohi Gilman, but is there opportunity to add at safety? Unknown.
Unknown at this point.
So here are the picks. I had one.
That's a lot of picks.
Somebody listed a round 7 pick 260 comp pick. I don't even know if that's a real thing. Most places have 9 picks. And as you see, a lot of late round picks there. And,
So
you do have...
Do we, trade up? That's a question.
Yeah. Well, I think, that round 2 pick was spent wisely on a Khalil Mack. Do you improve from 79 to get a little bit higher if there's somebody there? We took a look at the needs. There's thought around right tackle, and then there's a bunch of other positions and where do they fall. And every person's going to, pick a different order and how these, priorities. And is this the priority list here shown on the screen with right tackle followed by defensive line, edge 3, linebacker, right guard, cornerback 4, tight end 2, safety, wide receiver 3, running back 2. If Chris Olave is on the board at 17, do you take him at wide receiver 3 and utilize, that 4th tight end slot to add a 6th receiver?
Yes.
Kind of thing.
I don't know at this point.
Lots of iterations. We're never going to know exactly what it is until it happens on draft night or draft weekend, if you will. Any other comments about this? We just really wanted to run through the roster construction, what it looked like, potentially some gaps on the roster that would need filled.
I say right tackle is the only need.
Yeah.
really. But if, Andrew Booth or Derek Stingley, or mostly Derek Stingley, I think if he falls to 17, we grab him.
Yeah. So we're not going to get into that today on this podcast. We're going to leave it here with where the draft picks are, ideas around what is needed, and then we'll get into more detailed analysis on pick 17 and 79. I think the next episode we're going to do your mock draft 1.0, where we look at how you think that all 32 teams are going to select in the first round.
Well,
so that'll be the Saturday podcast.
It's kind of out of date.
We're going to do a new mock draft 1.0 because nobody needs to know about mock draft 0.0 that's out of date.
Yes.
Yeah. So this Saturday we're gonna go ahead and do Thomas's mock draft 1.0. Coming up, we're going to take a look at a Chargers 7-round mock draft from Thomas. We're also going to have a guest on the show, dial them in by phone and take a look at their 7-round Chargers mock draft. You'll do a final mock draft 2.0 right before the draft where you look at the first round once again, and then we'll be in. Then it'll be the Saturday after the first 3 rounds, and we'll start taking a look at what the Chargers actually did. If you stuck around with us for this long, really appreciate it.
It's great that you actually stuck around.
This has been the launch episode of Chargers Outside Zone. Follow us on Twitter at LAC Outside Zone, and we will be launching our YouTube channel, Chargers Outside Zone. Join us every Tuesday and Saturday for a new episode. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us.
Thanks.